It's time to get together and talk a little bit about Florida State fall camp because Ira Schoffel, managing editor of Warchant.com, is coming to a close. Florida State is about to install for LSU. That's right. The LSU game is actually not that far away. We've got a week 0 in between us, Ira, and then it's Florida State LSU in Orlando. We'll be down there for Warchant festivities. We'll post those in a little bit. But Ira, now that we've been through a couple of weeks of fall camp, first of all, how would you categorize it generally before we get to specifics? What have you seen this year maybe compared to past fall camps?
Yeah, I think it's a good point that you mentioned the week 0 games, that is a thing. And last year, I think Mike Norvell and his staff were very, very thankful that they had that week 0 game against Duquesne before they had to go play LSU. And I feel like this is a team that doesn't really need that. We'll see how they look against LSU. But I think you and I, walking off the practice field the very first day of camp, 2.5 weeks ago, we kind of made comments about this team seems to have a professionalism about it. Yeah. It seems to be very buttoned up. You can tell that the summer work that they put in, the fact that the coaches are out there with them, like they weren't starting from scratch. This is even the start of preseason, they were already pretty advanced. You saw them putting in some interesting things on both sides of the ball from a scheme standpoint. And then the other thing that's really stood out to me as it's gone on, and something you brought up a lot at practice, is how much teaching is going on from the existing players, the veterans, with the newcomers, and then even some of these transfers who've come in, Keon Coleman and Jeremiah Byers and Fentrell Cypress, and some of these guys who've played a lot of football at other schools, Braden Fisk, who are coming in, and they may not know exactly what everything is called at Florida State because they're new, but they know football and they know how the drills are supposed to be done. They know how the skills are supposed to be executed, and you see them leading as well. I think this is a team that I don't know. I mean, you have to go back a long way. And 13 obviously was a tremendously talented team, and we weren't out there every day back then. But I don't know if I've been around a lot of college football teams with so many leaders. And it doesn't have to be forced, and they're not doing it to get attention. They're just coaching up their teammates. That part of it's really stood out to me.
Yeah, I know that Corey's written about this a lot, Ira, but they're so old. Like, this is an old team that, they don't have a lot of rah guys. Well, not on offense, at least. On defense, Jared Verse will be rah. I think anywhere he goes, whether he's a rookie, out in Seattle next year or anywhere in between, that dude is loud. But they don't have a lot of rah guys who are about look at me or everybody get together. They check boxes. They did it in spring. You could hear it in Mike Norvell's voice after the spring showcase. You could hear it when we were in Charlotte covering the ACC kickoff, the work that they did in the summer. I mean, they're just checking boxes. And LSU is soon to be a box that they can check, but not just yet. So let's talk about camp and what we've seen, because now Florida State's regimen is going to get a little bit lighter. I mean, they go 6 straight days this week, culminating with today's scrimmage. Interviews are going to be up around lunchtime. But Ira, what's maybe the number one position group that has surprised you at this point through 2 weeks of camp, 3 weeks of camp?
Oh, wow. I would say probably defensive back in terms of surprising me to a degree, because I love this offense, man. I love the wide receivers. I love the tight ends. I love the backs coming out of the backfield. I love Jordan Travis. I love the line. I mean, this is an offense that's going to be a lot of fun for people to watch. But I think the DBs, man, have brought it. They've got a new position coach, Patrick Surtain Sr. We're not in the meeting rooms. I don't know what he teaches differently. I can't speak to exactly why they're better or why they compete better. But I've been really impressed by the DBs. I mean, and it's not to say they win every battle, but I think if you look across the board, Azaria Thomas has made a big jump, I think, from last year to this year, and he was as good as a freshman last year. He's made a big jump. Greedy Vance is solid as a rock. Kevin Noles looks really comfortable at safety. Shaheem is making more and more plays now. Shaheem Brown's making more and more plays at practice. You know what you have in Akeem Dent. He's been in that backfield now for going on 5 or 6 years. Renardo Green really emerged last year. He keeps getting better. So that group, and then these young DBs. I love these young DBs, Conrad Hussey and Edwin Joseph and Jabril Rawls and Ashlyn Barker. And I mean, there's just, you go on and on and on. That group is a lot of fun to watch as well. That defensive back group, I don't know that I didn't think it was a weakness, and Jarian Jones and other guys as well. I didn't think it was a weakness, but I didn't necessarily think it was a strength. And I feel like it's a strength. I don't know. How about you?
I think it's objectively the right answer. It's just they get downhill, they attack the ball. The number one term, I've said it a bunch, whether it's here or on the live shows we do, but zone eyes, the idea of zone
Yes.
eyes, this is what Surtain said to Corey at the luncheon before camp started. That term resonated with me because how many years have Florida State fans complained about not turning around and finding the football, Ira? I mean, it started a few years back, maybe a different coaching staff, and saying, turn around and find the damn football. It was a road game against NC State where I think they might have been flagged 12 times for this. And I don't know that I'm exaggerating that much for that particular issue. Wake Forest, even last year, was a circumstance where Florida State was in a position to make so many plays, but if you trusted yourself and you turn around, maybe you come away with the football. They are intercepting the ball, Ira, a bunch in camp. And if they can get more turnovers generated as a defense and hand the ball to this offense at midfield or on a short field, Ira, that's a recipe for blowouts of not just bad teams in the ACC, but even good teams could get blown out when the turnover battle is lopsided.
Yeah, and especially when you have a front that you think is going to be able to get home a lot without having to bring a ton of pressure. So I think because they've got the experience they have, and I think they feel pretty good about their guys in coverage, I think they will bring pressures. But I don't know that they have to. Certainly not necessarily in obvious passing situations. You think back to a couple of the times Adam Fuller's defenses have gotten burned, and we've been critical of them where they've gotten in third and long situations and they've had to bring blitzes and they've gotten burned and give up first downs. And you're like, come on, man. Like, we can't give up a 25-yard pass on a third down screen because you're bringing the house. But I also don't know sometimes if he felt like they could get home. This group, this front, can get home. You've got a lot of guys who can do it. Plus, you've got more instinctive and probably more aggressive defensive backs, which could be a really good recipe.
Yeah, and that'll lead me to maybe some of the most surprising players. I'll start with this one. I know that they were touted, in retrospect, one from high school and one from the transfer portal. But I'm going to stick with defensive tackles and Braden Fisk and then Josh Farmer. Braden Fisk is the transfer. He was in a green jersey all of spring. We saw how athletic he was. Western Michigan transfer. Notre Dame was maybe considered a favorite, and Florida State seals the deal. You know how athletic he was, but then you get to see how physical he is this fall camp. Man, Ira, the tape at Western Michigan doesn't do it justice. The versatility that this guy has, they beefed him up a little bit versus where he was at Western Michigan. But whether you want to talk about lining up against an interior offensive lineman or a tackle even, this dude does it all, and he's ferocious. And I think Josh Farmer has taken a huge step forward. Look, there's no doubt that the Darrell Jackson waiver ruling hurts, and it hurts a lot for Florida State. I mean, as recently as Friday, Darrell dominated stretches of practice, and you're like, man, if there's a way, I don't know how many politicians it's going to take for this thing to get opened back up and for Florida State to maybe get his services, but that it does hurt. But Ira, they've got more solutions there than I thought they would, especially in the wake of Darrell's absence. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a very good position group, even without Darrell Jackson. And like you said, there's a chance maybe these politicians have some sway, and the NCAA maybe gets some clarity and maybe reconsiders, not just for Darrell Jackson, but there are other players around college football around the country that are in that same position where they're trying to get eligible. And so we'll see what happens there. But even without him, they're in really good shape. And the guys you mentioned, we could talk on and on about Fabian Levitt and some of the other guys in the position, but Braden Fisk has exceeded my expectations. I knew he would be a guy that would have a good motor. You look at the tackle numbers at Western Michigan, he had 58 tackles, I think, last season. It's a lot of tackles for defensive linemen. But not all tackles are created equal. And it's okay. So if you're running plays down from behind the, 7 yards downfield or 12 yards downfield, I don't know how that plays in a Florida State defense, if that helps Florida State. But we've watched him. We're watching him go against Florida State's offensive linemen, and we think this is a good offensive line. And there are times where he is just flat out disruptive and a menace. And so I like him a lot. I was the other day at practice. Mickey Andrews was watching practice, and I asked him what he thought of Braden Fisk, and he said, "Oh, he could have played with us back in the day." And I think that speaks volumes. And so he's impressive. Josh Farmer, I've always been riding that train. For a long time, I've been a big believer in Josh Farmer, so I'm not surprised. But it's been cool to see him take the jump he made. Because, remember when Adam Fuller brings it up all the time, that Louisville game last year when Josh Farmer got thrown in and did not look like he was ready to play. Mm-hmm. And I was disappointed because I knew we'd seen him practice.
Yes.
You knew he could be better than that. And you started to see it later in the year. Then you saw it in the spring. And now here you are at practice. He looks like, a top flight defensive tackle. You put him in that mix with Fabian Lovett and Braden Fisk. And Dennis Briggs is a guy who nobody talks about, who because he's gone back and forth positions, he's a very talented defensive tackle too. So that group's gonna be a lot of fun, and you're right to single those guys out.
Yeah, well, and so now the keys are yours, Ira, in terms of either surprise players to you or an MVP, a guy that stood out most consistently. I know that Braden Fisk is one of those as we're doing observation reports on warchant.com, and make sure to head over there, sign up at the website. The coverage is the best in the business. Braden Fisk's name is on a lot of those practice observation reports. But for you, either a surprise player or an MVP, who would you list?
Across the whole team?
Sure. Yeah, we've talked a lot of defense too. If you got a guy on offense, feel free.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think offensively, I don't know, man. I think, Keon Coleman's been the big surprise for me.
Yeah.
I knew he caught, almost 60 passes last year at Michigan State. I knew he'd be good. I didn't think he'd be this good. I think, you combine him with Johnny Wilson and the tight ends they have, it's pretty remarkable. As far as an MVP, man, I'm going to go with the chalk. I got to go Jordan. The thing to me about Jordan is it's not just – it's now we're at the point now where, like, when he makes really good throws, that's a given. Like, he can make all the throws now. Like, he at any part of the field. I mean, at practice the other day we were out there and he's zipping it across the middle. If it needs to be low, it's low. If it needs to be high, it's high. If it needs to be, I mean, he's got all the throws, but it's the way he operates the offense and how he knows the offense. It feels like Mike Norvell's brain is in Jordan Travis. Like, it feels like Mike Norvell's playing a video game and Jordan Travis is his I don't know what you call it, his me, or and we, where he's doing exactly what you think Mike Norvell would want him to do. Is it perfect 100% of the time? No. He's actually had a pick here and there. He's made some mistakes, but for the most part, it feels like you're watching a quarterback play what's in the head coach's mind.
Yeah. Well, and I think, look, sorry, I'm going to have to do it. Iron sharpens iron, I suppose. I think the offense is being better prepared by this defense. This is the first time where the offense, I think, has been pushed. Next time we get to talk to Jordan Travis, I really want to ask him the question, which is, are you being pushed harder by this defense? Because the throws that he's making are into tighter windows than I can remember in Jordan Travis' career here. Right. And some of the decisions he has to make are forced quicker because of the penetration by the defensive line. Braden Fisk is, whether that's from the interior or maybe they got him lined up, he's going to be a combo lineman. They've said that. Just some of the pressures he sees, Jared Verse. I mean, when he's out there, Jared Verse is dominating. So you always think, quicker because number 5's out there. So, I mean, it's just that this offense, I believe, is going to be a lot sharper because the defense actually can compete with it. Maybe this might be one of the top 2 or 3 defenses it sees all year, Florida State. And that's every day in practice. That's how teams get better. But for me, I'd say Johnny has been outstanding too. Maybe there was a mediocre start to camp for a day or two. But Ira, if you talk about the versatility, we know he can block. But some of the things that he does over the top, the body control, the route running. He broke off a route on Friday in the red zone against Azareye'h Thomas. I don't know if it was a double move or a triple move. It required protection for Jordan Travis, but it was just so clinical. I mean, I think Johnny's taken another step in his refinement, which is bad news for a lot of teams on Florida State's schedule.
Well, and then again, you throw in Jaheim and Kyle Morlock and Marqueston Douglas. Also at that Friday practice, Marqueston Douglas makes catches that are really impressive, and again, in tight windows against tight coverage. But the one thing I would say, though, I'm curious to see because there are times when this defense gets confused by what they're doing offensively.
Yeah.
And they do a really good job, Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins and that staff do a really good job of putting defenders in conflict and getting some guys pretty wide open. And that still happens. The defense is holding its own, but that still happens as well. And this is against a defense that what impresses me about that is you can look at it 2 ways. On one hand, you could say, well, geez, that's not good. That just happened to the defense, the linebacker and the safety, or the corner and the safety, or whatever. But think about the fact if it's happening to them and they see this offense all the time, that's got to give you some excitement about what might be possible on Saturdays.
Yeah, the quality of this group is just, it gets better every camp. At some point, that's not going to be true. I keep saying they get better every camp. There's diminishing returns, but Ira, it's true again. And most of the things that, if you talk about a position battle or a question remaining in the next couple of weeks, and that's where we'll move next, they have answers, good answers just about everywhere on the field. It's just a matter of who is going to be the final answer. for some of these positions that they're going to win. So I'll turn it over to you. Maybe the most interesting battle that you're wanting to see shake out. In truth, we probably won't be able to talk about this until post-game against LSU, but there's still not everything is crystallized quite yet on the roster in terms of who starts and who's a part of the two deep. What do you think is the most interesting battle that still remains for Florida State?
Oh man, there's still some really good ones on the offensive line. I think the biggest ones is the two tackle spots. I think to me is still very much in flux, and it may be throughout the season. You know, Robert Scott's a second team All ACC left tackle. He has started a ton of games there, so you wouldn't necessarily think that he's in any jeopardy. But they did bring in Jeremiah Byers, and Bless Harris was a starter last year as well, and so those guys are certainly in the thick of it. So you got three guys there, maybe four if you add in Julian Armella, you know, maybe somebody else. But for the most part, those three guys, one of them is not going to start. I'm really curious to see which one of them is not going to start. I've been saying since the offseason, I thought they would end up with Robert Scott and Bless Harris because of the experience. They know what they've got out of them. But Jeremiah Byers has been good. I mean, he's been really good, and it wouldn't shock me to see him win the right tackle spot. And then from there, there's a ton of competition for, okay, who gets on next? Like, even if you know who the starters are going to be at wide receiver, if you know who the starters are going to be at tight end or a different position, who's first off the bench? How many reps do they get? How many series do they get? I think there's some great battles in there in that level.
Yeah, I agree. I think number 3 receiver might be in all, like you're saying about the offensive line. It could be an all-season development. Week to week, they've got a game plan for Deuce Spann. Week to week, they've got a game plan for Winston Wright, or even
Destin Hill,
Vandrevius Jacobs, who had a good spring. I mean, you could see a lot of different solutions. Also, you could run out there with 3 tight ends if you really wanted to, and have Biscuit in line to block, and then Jaheim Bell's lining up somewhere, and Kyle Morlock on the other side. I mean, they've got so many options that the targets week to week, outside of Johnny and Keon and maybe the top running back, I don't know, Ira, it could fluctuate all year long. So maybe that's not a question that could be answered before they kick off against LSU. I do think the secondary question needs to be, though, and that's something that's interesting to me. You've got 4 or 5 good candidates for 3 corner spots. And I get it when LSU or whoever runs 4 wide receivers out there, that solves some of the problem, but I don't think that's their base. They're not going to put 4 corners out there at one time. And I think the battle at safety is also interesting because Kevin Noles has made it interesting to me. Yeah. The way Adam Fuller talked about him after scrimmage number 1, he was effusive and said, yeah, Kevin could still play nickel for us, but I think he's going to have an impact on that safety room. So now suddenly with Akeem Dent-Shaheem and Kevin Noles, that's not a settled matter either. I think they probably want to have their ducks in a row for LSU as to who are going to be their guys and where they line up. And Ira, frankly, outside of Greedy Vance at nickel, I don't know that everything is solidified.
That's actually, I was going to say, I think Greedy Vance, and I feel like Renardo Green's going to start. I feel like those are 2 guys that are going or will end up in the starting lineup. But yeah, I think after that, it's a grab bag. I mean, I Fentrell Cypress, I think is a good, solid addition. Second team All ACC at Virginia. He can play. We've seen him play. He hasn't been dominant in practice, but he's been a good, solid corner. And I think there's a chance he may be a guy that looks even a little bit better when the games start. But man, I mean, Azaria Thomas has come on. I mean, it has been very impressive the way he's developed. Jarian Jones started a bunch of games in the second half last season. And then, as you said, those safety spots, I think, again, I'm usually going to end on the side of experience, especially guys that have played well. So I still think it's going to be Akeem Dent and Shaheem Brown to start off with. But it wouldn't surprise me if you saw some things change during the season, because Kevin Noles is a really nice player and he's a really smart player. That's the first thing that comes up when you talk to anybody, whether it's another player or a coach. Man, the first thing they talk about with Kevin Noles is how smart he is and how he understands his defense. And that's somebody usually you want on the field because he can make sure everybody else is doing what they're supposed to do.
All right, so I'm going to go with what do they call this, Ira, when you give it a name? It's like a mentionable or something. They used to do this in superlatives. It's like in the yearbook, you do.
Oh yeah, most likely to be whatever.
So for me, and I'll give you a chance to think about a superlative. You can create it and then create your player. So on the fly here, but for me, the number 1 player coach of camp is Kevin Noles. There's no doubt in my mind that it's Kevin Noles. We've seen other guys like Keon Coleman, Darius Washington. You mentioned some others, Braden Fisk, pulling guys aside and instructing them. Jared Verse has always been really good about this too. But Kevin Noles, literally, Ira, the defense could be standing over in a group, watching the 11 on the field, and Kevin will be at the depth of the safeties. and just screaming at them about their alignment, where they need to be, where their eyes need to be, their checks. And Adam Fuller might be right behind them, or Coach Surtain might be right behind them, giving them instructions. But there is Kevin consistently, no matter who's out there, if they're veterans or they're young guys, he, for me, is, in terms of superlatives, the number one player coach. Do you have one?
The first thing that came to my mind when you said that is, I guess, maybe like star of the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love Brock Glenn, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how it's going to play out. He's going to, going into next season, and I'm not saying he's the number 2 guy right now. Tate Rodemaker has played in college football games and played in meaningful games that were on the line. So my guess is that's going to carry a lot of weight if he's needed in a game this season. But going into next year, you bring in Luke Kromenhoek, who's as impressive as it could get, may, by the time he enrolls at Florida State, may end up being the number 2 or 3 quarterback in the country, maybe the number 1 quarterback in the country, who knows, and is a great leader and great teammate and all that. And I think he's going to be in the mix very early on in his time at Florida State. But, man, every time I watch Brock, it's to the point now at Brock Glenn, like I want to see him. Like I want to, when they're doing drills, I want to see what he does in the drill. When they're doing 11-11 and I see, 11's back in. Okay, I want to see this. Like I like watching him operate this offense. He's got really nice touch. He's got zip. I don't know, man. Like I've become a Brock Glenn fan. Like I thought he'd be pretty good, but every day I feel like I'm more impressed by Brock Glenn.
Get the pom-poms out when he comes off.
I do.
Yeah. I do. I'm not going to try and put words in his mouth, but I will. I think Mike Norvell agrees with you. I think he's excited every time that 11 is lining up just to see what he does next. I don't want to create a situation, Ira, where we hype him up like he's going to be the next coming of Jameis or but at the same time, every practice, I'll be writing in my notes or standing next to you and we're talking, and you just go, oh, man, he did it again. There was another player. Oh, geez, 11. Go off, young man. Well, and he makes mistakes, but it's just the maturity of some of the things he does. It looks like a junior. Doesn't look like a true freshman.
Yeah, and I guess that's my point. It's not like you're watching it and going, oh, this is preternaturally gifted. Like this is, the most amazing arm or the most amazing throw. But to be on campus for 8 months and to operate the offense the way he does, how calm he is back there in the pocket, and he takes sacks and he has been picked off. And it's like I said, like you said, it's not he's perfect, but man, it's fun to see how far he's come in 8 months, and then to think, okay, what could this guy be? But again, I also think Luke Kromenhoek's going to be a stud.
Yeah.
So and so that's going to be fun to watch. And then and again, Tate is, but it's for the most part, this team is about now. It's about what can this team do in 2023. I don't think Brock Glenn's a huge part of what they can do in 2023. But man, I'm eager to see what he can become.
We'll learn more about scrimmage number 2 a little bit later today on the channel. Warchant TV will have all the coverage of the coaches' interviews. It's a morning scrimmage this time around. Last time it was late at night. This one is in the morning. A situational scrimmage, as Mike Norvell put it, after practice on Friday. That will be on the TV side, but the site's going to have even more coverage and in-depth breakdowns of what we've seen and a breakdown of the coaching staff, their thoughts. We get all the coordinators. Ira, what's coming up this week as well on warchant.com, the website side of it?
Yeah, and some of it's going to happen over the course of the early in the week before they get back to practice, because the scrimmage is going to be on Sunday, or like you said, and then they are not practicing on Monday or Tuesday. So we're going to do a lot of things there, because when they return to practice on Wednesday, that's basically going to be like LSU week, LSU 10 days, LSU 11 days. It's going to be an expanded game week preparation, but they'll be focused on LSU. The content at that point is going to be very much focused on the matchups of these two teams, what LSU looks like, what Florida State looks like, how FSU can try to exploit some things for LSU, and what they have to watch out for. But in the meantime, early this week, also, we're going to do a lot of kind of retrospectives on this camp, what stories what we feel good about, what we don't feel good about, any concerns we have. And then also, I think a fun story we're going to do is kind of our top 40 confessions. And we did our Warchant top 40 back during the summer. We all did our top 40 list, put it together. But I think as I watch practices, a lot of times I find myself wanting to confess. I feel like I need to go in the confessional and explain why I did what I did, and maybe try to atone for leaving some guys maybe off my top 40 or too low or maybe too high on my top 40. So we're going to get the staff together to kind of share some of our top 40 confessionals.
Boy, if only we had cameras and a studio in our homes to do that MTV Real World style.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe I could steal that idea and we can run it on here as well, a confessional. That's coming up on warchant.com. And remember, folks, Director Ben is putting it up on the screen right now. But when we head down to Orlando, we want to see you. We'll be at the Wall Street Plaza the entirety of the weekend. Wall Street Plaza is in downtown Orlando. Hooch is going to be the name of the bar. That's our headquarters. We're going to have a live meet and greet on Saturday. That begins at 4 o'clock with a live and in-person Seminole headlines at 5 p.m. from Hooch. Going to be an outstanding time on Saturday. On Sunday, we will be at the Wall Street Plaza early, noon to 2 for a pregame show. We're going to call it Tallahassee Game Day, or I guess we call it Orlando Game Day for that matter, as Jeff Cameron and myself will be live from noon to 2. Then after the game at Hooch for a post-game show until 1 a.m. with me and Gene Williams. We'll see how rowdy that crowd is going to be. If Florida State wins, I'll bet they'll be partying into the wee hours. But we want to see you out there in Orlando, and we want to always keep you updated about where we're going to be. So that's it for now. It's but a morsel. Ira says we're going to have more breakdowns, confessionals, and more on warchant.com and Warchant TV. So for all the best coverage of FSU fall camp and now LSU installation, stick with us. Hit the like button underneath this video and subscribe. It's absolutely free. We'll talk to you on Warchant TV next time.